The Mercedes-Benz S-Class sat crippled on State Route 22's shoulder hood, yawning open steam curling into Pennsylvania's December morning like a white flag of mechanical surrender. 7:17 a.m., according to the Cartier Santos watch, catching weak sunlight on Sophia Winter's wrist as she gripped her phone with enough force to crack cheaper devices. Her voice carried the kind of cold fury that made corporate vice presidents check their calendars nervously. "Patterson, I don't care about your logistics issues. The board meeting starts at 9:30 sharp. If I miss this Morrison acquisition presentation, the entire deal collapses and your division absorbs the fallout. Find me transportation, helicopter, town car, anything, now." She ended the call with a savage swipe. The Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent suddenly felt suffocating. 38 years old. Operations director for one of the Northeast's largest industrial holdings, and she was stranded on a rural highway like some helpless damsel from a roadside assistance commercial. The indignity burned. The Ford F-150 that rolled past had seen better decades. Rust bloomed along the wheel wells, the paint faded to a shade that might once have been blue, and hand-lettered text on the driver's door read, "Mitchell Repairs," in the kind of amateur script that screamed weekend side hustle. Sophia barely registered it until the truck's brake lights flared red. Inside that truck, Garrett Hayes glanced at the expensive car, then at his daughter. 7 years old, Bryn had her mother's blonde hair and a 7-year-old's absolute certainty about right and wrong. She'd stopped mid-bite of her granola bar, staring at the stranded Mercedes with concern that looked too adult on such a young face. Her words came out muffled around breakfast. "Dad, that lady needs help." Garrett checked his watch. 8 minutes until his shift started, and Morrison Manufacturing's new management had made it brutally clear that tardiness wouldn't be tolerated. He'd worked that plant for 12 years without a single write-up. Starting now seemed like poor timing. But Bryn's eyes held that look, the one that said she was measuring whether her father's actions matched his words. He'd spent 3 years since Addison's death teaching their daughter that character meant doing right when it cost something. The truck's transmission protested as he threw it into reverse. Sophia heard boots on gravel before she saw the man. 36, maybe, wearing work pants that had seen actual work and a Carhartt jacket with grease stains that hadn't come from a fashion designer's carefully distressed collection. The tool belt riding his hips looked like it belonged there, worn leather shaped by years of use. His face carried the weathered quality of someone who worked outside in Pennsylvania winters, hands calloused in a way no gym routine could replicate. His approach held neither eagerness nor hesitation. "Morning, ma'am. Having car trouble?" The question's obviousness irritated her more than it should have. Stating the situation doesn't improve it. Something flickered in his eyes, patience being exercised rather than felt. "I'm a mechanic. Can I take a look?" Sophia assessed him the way she'd assess any resource. Working class, clearly. The truck suggested income somewhere south of $50,000 annually. The grease under his fingernails spoke to manual labor. Her instincts, honed by a decade of corporate negotiations, tagged him as someone used to being underestimated. Her voice carried skepticism like a shield. "Do you have ASE certification?" The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. 12 years of experience, ma'am. But if you'd rather wait for a tow truck, I understand." He started turning away. Sophia's watch showed 7:19. The word came out sharper than intended. "Wait." Garrett moved to the engine bay with the economical grace of someone who'd performed this examination thousands of times. His hands moved across components with confident familiarity, not touching randomly but following a logical diagnostic sequence. 30 seconds of inspection told him everything. His voice carried the flat certainty of expertise. "Upper radiator hose ruptured. Pressure buildup from overheating caused catastrophic failure of the rubber seal. He touched the engine block metal, still hot enough to burn careless hands, and held contact longer than comfort would normally allow. Block itself is intact. I can jerry-rig a temporary fix to get you mobile, but you'll need a proper replacement within 15 miles. This solution won't hold past 50 miles per hour. Sophia found herself watching his hands. They moved with precision, no wasted motion, each action purposeful. Behind him, a little girl had climbed out of the truck and stood nearby, clutching a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. The child's voice carried across the winter morning. "Dad, what's wrong with the pretty lady's car?" Garrett's answer came without looking up from the engine. "See this hose, Princess? When pressure builds up inside a closed system without a release valve, something eventually gives way. That's why engineers design safety mechanisms into everything important. Pressure needs somewhere to go." Bryn nodded with the seriousness of a graduate student. She picked up a wrench from her father's toolbox, clearly knowing exactly where it lived, and handed it to him without being asked. The practiced coordination spoke to countless hours of this exact routine. Something unfamiliar stirred in Sophia's chest. She recognized it intellectually as envy, though the emotion felt foreign enough to be uncomfortable. This man and his daughter shared a bond that existed outside spreadsheets and quarterly earnings reports, beyond designer clothes and luxury vehicles. Real connection, uncomplicated by wealth or status or the 1,000 other factors that turned Sophia's relationships into chess matches. Garrett worked with the focused intensity of someone racing a clock. 7 minutes passed in near silence, broken only by the clink of metal on metal and Bryn's occasional question about what her father was doing and why. When he straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag that had started life as someone's old t-shirt, his expression carried satisfaction. "Done. But don't push past 50 and find a mechanic within the next 15 miles. This fix is temporary. It'll get you where you're going, but that's all it's designed for." Sophia reached for her Louis Vuitton wallet. The gesture felt automatic, the way she solved most problems. Benjamin Franklin's face stared up at her in a neat stack. "How much, though?" Garrett's refusal came without hesitation. "No charge, ma'am. Just helping someone in a tough spot." The response genuinely surprised her. In Sophia's world, everyone wanted something. Favors carried invisible price tags that came due at inconvenient moments. Free help existed only in children's books and political speeches. Her voice softened fractionally. "You're serious?" His eyes met hers directly. "Yes, ma'am. Drive safe." Sophia opened her mouth to insist on payment, then closed it. Something about his expression suggested that pushing would insult him in ways money couldn't repair. Instead, she found herself asking a different question. The words came out gentler than she'd intended. "At least tell me where you work." Garrett paused, one hand on Bryn's shoulder. "Morrison Manufacturing. Machine shop." The information hit Sophia like cold water. Her carefully neutral expression slipped for just a microsecond, surprise mixing with something more complicated before professional control reasserted itself. But Garrett had seen it. The flicker of recognition, the subtle shift in posture that said this information meant something. She recovered smoothly manufactured smile, appearing like stage makeup. Morrison Manufacturing. How interesting. Garrett's confusion showed plainly. Something wrong with that. Sophia started the Mercedes, which coughed to life with mechanical reluctance. She looked at him through the window, and something in her expression shifted. Not warm exactly, but acknowledging. Her parting words carried weight he couldn't decode. "Not at all, but I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again very soon." The Mercedes pulled away, engine protesting but functional. Garrett stood watching it disappear, Bryn's hand in his. His daughter's observation came with 7-year-old directness. "Dad, why were you looking at her like that?" Heat crept up Garrett's neck. "I wasn't looking." Bryn's knowing expression belonged on someone 3 times her age. "You looked at her the way you look at Mommy in the photos, the ones in your bedroom." Garrett had no response to that, because Bryn was right and lying to his daughter ranked high on his list of unacceptable behaviors. Something about Sophia Winters had struck a chord he'd thought permanently silenced by grief. Not just physical attraction, though she was undeniably beautiful. Something in her eyes suggested depths hidden beneath that corporate armor, vulnerability carefully locked away from a world that would exploit it. He pushed the thought aside as they climbed back into the truck. Whatever momentary connection he'd felt was irrelevant. Women like Sophia Winters existed in a different universe than single-father mechanics driving rust-bucket Fords. The dashboard clock showed 7:32 as they pulled into Morrison Manufacturing's employee parking lot. Garrett had exactly 13 minutes before his shift started, just enough time to drop Bryn at the on-site childcare center that Richard Morrison had been threatening to cut for 6 straight months. Bryn's question came as he unbuckled her seatbelt. "Dad, will you see that pretty lady again?" Garrett kissed her forehead, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Don't think so, sweetheart. Women like her don't work in places like this." The irony of those words would haunt him within the hour. Morrison Manufacturing sprawled across 42,000 square feet of industrial Pennsylvania landscape. 82 workers total, down from 123 years ago. The equipment dated back to the 90s, maintenance deferred in favor of quarterly dividend payments. Garrett knew every machine intimately, could diagnose problems from sound. Alone understood the facility's rhythms the way musicians knew their instruments. The PA system crackled to life as he reached his locker. Static preceded the announcement, suggesting the intercom system ranked somewhere near bottom of the maintenance priority list. Richard Morrison's voice carried forced enthusiasm that fooled exactly nobody. "All personnel to main production floor. Mandatory meeting in 5 minutes. Attendance is required." Travis Brennan materialized at Garrett's elbow. 41, built like a fire hydrant, with the kind of strength that came from decades of physical labor rather than gym memberships. His Irish-American family had worked this plant for 2 generations before corporate buyouts changed everything. Travis kept his voice low. "Heard the new operations director flies in today. Corporate's sending someone to optimize us, which means layoffs." Garrett closed his locker with more force than necessary. "That's just rumors." Travis's expression suggested otherwise. "Rich people don't buy companies to keep things the same, brother. They buy them to squeeze every dollar out before the corpse goes cold." The main production floor could hold 300 people comfortably. 82 workers made it feel cavernous. Equipment hummed around them, never truly silent, even when idled. The smell of machine oil and hot metal hung permanent in the air, familiar as breathing. Richard Morrison stood on an elevated platform usually reserved for safety demonstrations. 58 years old, wearing a suit that still had creases from the store packaging. His attempt to look important only emphasized how uncomfortable he was in leadership positions. He'd inherited this plant from his father, run it adequately but without innovation, and jumped at the first acquisition offer that came along. His microphone feedback screeched before he got the levels right. "Good morning, everyone. Exciting developments today. Hartwell Industrial Holdings has sent their top operations director to personally oversee our integration and ensure we're positioned for success in the coming quarters." The corporate speak landed like wet cement. Workers exchanged glances that mixed skepticism with genuine fear. Integration meant layoffs. Success meant the people remaining worked twice as hard for the same pay. Richard's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Please welcome Ms. Sophia Winters. The side door opened. Garrett's world tilted sideways. Sophia Winters entered wearing a different suit than this morning Chanel he'd learn later worth more than his truck, with her hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized her cheekbones and made her eyes look even more penetrating. She moved with the absolute confidence of someone who knew her presence commanded attention without demanding it. The sunglasses she removed with deliberate slowness probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. Their eyes met across 100 feet of factory floor. Garrett watched recognition flicker across her face. One microsecond where her mask slipped genuine surprise visible before professional control slammed back into place. Then nothing. Her expression went completely neutralized, passing over him like he was another piece of equipment to be cataloged and assessed. Understanding crashed over Garrett like ice water. She'd known. This morning, helping her refusing payment, she'd known exactly who he was and where he worked. The whole interaction had been some kind of test he hadn't known he was taking. Travis leaned close, whisper barely audible. "That's her Jesus. She looks like she eats broken dreams for breakfast." Sophia's voice carried across the production floor without amplification. Clear, precise cutting, the kind of voice that made subordinates check their work twice and executives rehearse presentations until muscle memory took over. Her opening words eliminated any illusions about this being a friendly visit. "I'll be direct because I don't respect wasting time, mine or yours. Hartwell Industrial Holdings acquired Morrison Manufacturing because preliminary analysis suggested potential for significant improvement. That analysis was to be charitable optimistic." She clicked a remote. A projection screen descended from the ceiling displaying graphs and charts that painted Morrison Manufacturing's operations in shades of red. Numbers jumped out with accusatory clarity. Her finger traced declining trends. Production efficiency 71%, industry standard for comparable facilities 88%, your profit margin 9.2%, competitors 24%, waste rate 17% higher than acceptable parameters. Each statistic landed like a physical blow. These weren't abstractions, they were jobs, livelihoods, mortgages, and car payments and kids' college funds. Sophia's eyes swept across the assembled workers. "You have 6 months to meet these targets." The pause stretched just long enough for hope to flicker. Then she continued, and her voice carried the warmth of a contract termination. "Or this facility closes and all assets are liquidated. 82 jobs disappear, your mortgages, your families, your futures gone. The choice is entirely yours. Deliver results or face consequences." Someone in the back actually gasped. The sound echoed in sudden silence. Sophia wasn't finished. "Sentiment doesn't pay bills, results do. I don't care if you've worked here 30 years or 30 days, your tenure is irrelevant, your output is everything. Legacy means nothing. Performance is all that matters." Garrett felt rage building like pressure behind his ribs. This was the woman he'd helped, the woman whose vulnerability this morning had seemed so genuine, the woman he'd actually felt drawn to. Richard Morrison attempted to interject voice, obsequious. "Ms. Winters, as you can see, our workforce is very dedicated and—" Sophia cut him off without even looking. "Mr. Morrison, I'll tour the facility now. Anyone impeding productivity will be documented." She walked toward the production floor entrance. Her path took her directly past Garrett. She stopped. Their eyes met. Garrett waited for acknowledgement, for a nod, a subtle thanks, any indication that this morning's interaction had meant something, that his help had registered as anything beyond a transaction. Sophia's gaze moved across him like he was transparent. No recognition, no gratitude, no awareness of shared humanity. Just cold assessment before moving on. The dismissal hit harder than her termination speech. Garrett's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Travis's whisper carried horrified understanding. "Brother, was that the woman from this morning?" Garrett managed a single tight nod. Travis muttered something creative involving Sophia's parentage and anatomical impossibilities. "Ice Queen is right. Pretty sure her blood runs at about 32 degrees. But Garrett had seen something else in that brief moment. Something Sophia probably didn't realize showed. Her hands, perfectly manicured and adorned with jewelry that probably cost more than his truck, trembled slightly before she clasped them behind her back. Her jaw tightened, fractionally muscle-jumping with tension. The mask was perfect, but masks required effort to maintain. Whatever Sophia Winters was projecting, part of her felt something about this situation. Whether guilt or doubt or simple discomfort, Garrett couldn't tell. But she wasn't as coldly mechanical as she wanted everyone to believe, which somehow made her dismissal hurt worse. Sector 4 occupied the northern corner of Morrison Manufacturing, a labyrinth of industrial piping that carried high-pressure steam throughout the facility. Pipes ranged from 8 inches to 24 inches in diameter, wrapped in insulation that had seen better decades. Pressure gauges studded the system like mechanical eyes, needles trembling with system load. The constant background hiss of steam provided white noise that workers learned to ignore. Garrett had started in Sector 4 12 years ago, learning the system from Jimmy Kowalski. Jimmy had been 52 Polish immigrant with a mechanical genius that transcended formal education. He'd understood machines the way poets understood language, hearing meanings in sounds that others dismissed as noise. When Jimmy died in that Indiana plant explosion, killed by pressure system failure that 3 people had warned management about, Garrett inherited both his mentor's expertise and his paranoia about safety warnings. Travis walked beside him, going through daily inspection protocols. They'd performed this routine hundreds of times, checking gauge readings, listening for anomalies, feeling for unusual vibrations. Boring work that prevented catastrophic failures. Travis was mid-story about his wife's sister's visit. "I told Linda if Sharon stays another 2 weeks, I'm crashing at your place. That woman could complain about winning the lottery." Garrett's hand shot up, cutting him off. Silence fell between them, broken only by industrial background noise. Garrett pressed his ear against the main pressure line, a 24-inch steel pipe that fed steam to half the facility. The metal felt wrong against his cheek, warmer than it should be, vibrating with subtle harmonics that didn't match normal operating patterns. Then he heard it. Faint but distinct, a high-pitched whistling that existed just below the threshold of conscious awareness. The kind of sound that amateur mechanics dismissed as normal system operation. The kind of sound that preceded disaster. Travis watched Garrett's expression darken. "What is it?" Garrett pulled back from the pipe. "Put your ear here. Tell me what you hear." Travis pressed close, listened for 10 seconds, straightened with a shrug. "Just steam flow, maybe a little louder than usual." Garrett was already moving to the pressure gauge. The needle trembled at 109% of nominal operating pressure. Not critical, not even technically concerning. But concerning enough that he pulled out his tablet and accessed the maintenance log database. The numbers told a story. 4 weeks ago, 98%. 3 weeks ago, 101%. 2 weeks ago, 104%. Last week, 107%. Today, 109%. A clear upward trend. Steady, inexorable, accelerating. Garrett's voice came out flat. "Trav, this is a classic pre-failure signature. Pressure accumulation with insufficient venting." Travis looked at the numbers and his casual expression evaporated. "How serious are we talking?" Garrett moved along the pipe, checking adjacent systems. Relief valve 4 showed sluggish response time, 2.8 seconds when specs called for 1.2. Temperature readings ran 8 degrees above normal. Pipe vibration carried low-frequency harmonics that suggested internal turbulence. He didn't need to close his eyes to see it. The memory lived permanent in high definition behind his eyelids. Different factory 12 years ago. 24-year-old Garrett standing in wreckage that used to be a production bay. Emergency lights strobing through smoke. The acrid smell of burned metal and worse things. Jimmy Kowalski on a stretcher crushed by equipment torn loose in the explosion. Blood everywhere, so much blood that the first responders slipped in it. Jimmy's hand grabbing Garrett's grip, weak but desperate. Jimmy's voice barely audible over chaos. The pressure. I heard it. Should have stopped the line. Garrett tears, streaming, trying to hold his mentor together through force of will. Jimmy, hang on. Medics are coming, just hang on. Jimmy's final words. Tell Karen. Tell her. Then nothing. Empty eyes staring at nothing. 3 other workers died that day. Federal investigation determined the explosion was completely preventable. Pressure warnings ignored. Safety protocols dismissed. Management prioritizing production over precaution. Garrett had stood at Jimmy's funeral and sworn he'd never let it happen again. Travis's hand on his shoulder yanked him back to present. Brother, you okay? You went somewhere else. Garrett's hands were shaking. He forced them still. It's identical to Pennsylvania. The pattern, the sound, everything. This is how it starts. Travis glanced at the gauges, then at Garrett's face. Okay, so what do we do? The decision was simple. Report it for immediate shutdown and comprehensive inspection. Travis's expression showed conflict. Man, you heard Ice Queen up there. She's talking productivity targets and efficiency metrics. Garrett's voice came out harder than intended. I don't care what she's talking about. Safety first, always. No exceptions. Travis held up both hands in surrender. Your call, brother. I'm with you. Just saying this might not go how you hope. Sophia Winters and Richard Morrison appeared at Sector 4's entrance, while Garrett was still examining the secondary relief system. They wore hard hats and safety glasses, corporate compliance with safety regulations that neither particularly cared about. Richard was mid-sentence, sucking up with the desperation of someone terrified of irrelevance. As you can see, Ms. Winters' operations run smoothly here. We haven't had a single safety incident in 8 years. Garrett strode forward, Travis a half-step behind. Excuse me, Ms. Winters. I need to report a safety concern. Richard's face flushed, angry red veins visible at his temples. Hayes, we're conducting an important facility tour. Sophia's voice cut across Richard's bluster like a scalpel. What concern? Garrett kept his voice professional despite the anger simmering beneath. Sector 4 main pressure line is showing escalating fluctuations over 4 consecutive weeks. Currently reading 109% up from 98% baseline a month ago. Acoustic signature indicates potential internal blockage with insufficient venting. I'm recommending immediate system shutdown for detailed inspection before the trend continues. Richard sputtered. Shutdown. Do you have any idea what that costs? $50,000 per hour of lost production? Garrett didn't look at Richard. His eyes stayed on Sophia. Safety doesn't have a dollar value, sir. Sophia studied him with an expression impossible to read. Her eyes moved from his face to the pressure gauge to the pipes themselves, processing information with the speed of someone trained to make rapid assessments. For just a moment, Garrett thought he saw something, recognition of his mourning help. Acknowledgement of his expertise, maybe even concern. Then her professional mask locked into place. Her question came precisely articulated. Mr. Hayes, correct? Do you have concrete data indicating imminent failure risk? Garrett chose his words carefully. 12 years of experience reading these systems and clear pattern recognition, ma'am. Something flickered in Sophia's eyes. Anecdotal evidence is not data, Mr. Hayes. Are there any system alarms triggered, any automated warnings? Garrett felt the conversation slipping away. Not yet at critical threshold, but trend analysis clearly indicates. Sophia interrupted. Trend analysis without actual failure indicators is speculation, not engineering. Desperation made Garrett tactical error. The words came out before better judgment could stop them. Ms. Winters, this morning you trusted me with your vehicle. Sophia's expression froze into something carved from ice. Richard's ears practically perked up, sensing blood in the water. Wait, you two have met before. Sophia's voice could have flash-frozen water. Mr. Hayes provided roadside assistance, a professional transaction. It has zero relevance to operational discussions. She turned to Richard, and her tone dismissed Garrett as thoroughly as if he'd ceased to exist. This exemplifies exactly the reactionary thinking you warned me about. Creating problems from normal operational variance to justify unnecessary interventions. Garrett felt like he'd been physically struck. She'd used him. This morning's vulnerability, the moment of connection, her gratitude, all performance. Worse, she was weaponizing his help against him. His voice came out quiet but carrying complete conviction. Ms. Winters, with all due respect, experience is data. 12 years reading these systems. Men have died because warnings like this were ignored. I won't stay silent. Sophia met his eyes directly. And I won't authorize a $50,000 per hour shutdown based on feelings. Dismissed Mr. Hayes. Garrett didn't move, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed that walking away meant condemning people to Jimmy's fate. Sophia's voice dropped to something dangerous. That wasn't a request. It was a direct order. Richard seized the opportunity. Ms. Winters, perhaps we should discuss Hayes's pattern of... Sophia cut him off. Conference room, 10 minutes. Mr. Hayes, your presence is required. She walked away, heels clicking sharp rhythm on concrete. Richard followed like an eager puppy. Travis waited until they were out of earshot. Brother, I think you just got fired. The conference room's glass walls offered no privacy. Garrett could see Bryn through the window, sitting on a metal bench outside, clutching her stuffed elephant legs, swinging with 7-year-old nervousness. She'd spent enough afternoons in this plant to recognize when adults were angry. Inside, Sophia commanded the head of the conference table like a queen on a throne. Richard sat at her right hand, expression mixing triumph with anxiety. Garrett stood. Nobody had invited him to sit with jaw clenched and hands loose at his sides. Richard opened with practiced condescension. Ms. Winters, I appreciate you making time for this. Garrett Hayes has been problematic for some time. 12 years here and he still doesn't understand chain of command or the realities of modern manufacturing. Garrett started to respond. I understand that safety protocols... Richard talked over him. There, see, interrupting. No respect for management authority. Sophia's fingers steepled in front of her. Mr. Hayes, I reviewed your personnel file last night as part of my preparation. 3 previous instances where you recommended operational shutdowns. Combined cost $340,000. Actual failures discovered 0. Garrett tried to explain. Because prevention works, ma'am. The 2019 hydraulic system would have... Sophia kept talking. Required a $1,200 gasket replacement, hardly the catastrophic failure you predicted. Garrett's voice rose slightly. But it would have become catastrophic if ignored. That's exactly how prevention... Sophia stood. The motion commanded attention, silence falling like a physical weight. She walked around the table, stopping directly in front of Garrett. Close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive that probably had a French name, and see the absolute certainty in her eyes. Her words came measured, deliberate, designed to cut. Mr. Hayes, I recognize a pattern. You manufacture crises to make yourself feel indispensable. Classic insecure employee behavior. You value feeling important over actual productivity. Middle-aged men terrified of obsolescence. Creating drama becomes your last grasp for relevance in an industry that's evolved past you. The words hit like physical blows. His age, his class, his value, all dismissed as psychological weakness rather than genuine expertise. Garrett felt something crack inside his chest. His response came tight with controlled anger. With respect, ma'am, how many days have you actually worked in manufacturing? Because I've spent 12 years listening to these systems. You have an MBA and spreadsheets. I have scars, blood, and memories of watching friends die. Silence stretched. Richard looked between them like watching tennis. Sophia's voice didn't waver. Are you finished? Garrett looked through the glass at Bryn. His daughter watched with worried eyes, elephant clutched tight. Everything he did was teaching her something about the world. What lesson was this moment? His voice softened but lost none of its conviction. One more thing. My daughter is 7 years old. She lost her mother at 4. Everything I do is to make sure she has a father who comes home every night, and to make sure my co-workers have fathers and mothers who come home to their families. Call that drama if you want. I call it giving a damn about human life. The words hung in air that felt suddenly heavier. Sophia's mask cracked for just an instant. Something moved behind her eyes, pain perhaps, or recognition of loss she understood too well. But it vanished before Garrett could be certain it was real. She turned to Richard. Your recommendation? Richard's triumph was barely concealed. Immediate termination, too many qualified mechanics available without his attitude problems. Sophia's attention returned to Garrett. Pack your belongings. HR will process final paperwork. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. Garrett tried once more. Ms. Winters. Her voice came flat. Security will escort you from the premises. This meeting is concluded. Garrett walked to the door hand on the handle, then stopped, turned back. Every fiber of his being screamed that this woman needed to understand what she was doing. His words came low, but carrying absolute certainty. Ms. Winters, what I'm about to say isn't from anger. It's from 12 years of experience watching these systems. There is something critically wrong in Sector 4. If you ignore it, people will die. And when that happens, and it will happen, you'll have to live with those faces, those families, their children asking why mommy or daddy didn't come home. For the rest of your life, blood doesn't wash off conscience. Sophia's face had gone pale. Is that a threat? Garrett held her gaze. No, ma'am, it's a promise. And you'll remember these words. He walked out. The door closed with finality. Richard's voice carried through the glass. Well handled, Ms. Winters. Decisiveness like that earns respect. Sophia didn't respond. She stared at the door Garrett had exited through, and her hands trembled beneath the conference table where nobody could see. Bryn ran to Garrett the moment he pushed through the door. She hit him at waist-height, arms wrapping tight around him with desperate 7-year-old strength. Her face pressed into his jacket, and he felt her tears soaking through fabric. Her voice came muffled. Daddy, why were they yelling at you? Garrett knelt down, bringing himself eye level with his daughter. He couldn't lie to her, wouldn't lie to her. Addison had made him promise during those final hospital days that he'd always be honest with Bryn about the important things. His hands found her shoulders, gripped gentle but grounding. Baby, sometimes grown-ups disagree about what's important, what matters most. Bryn's eyes, Addison's eyes, the same blue-gray that changed with the light, searched his face. Did you get fired? The words hurt coming out. Yeah, Princess, I did. Bryn's arms went around his neck, holding on like he might disappear. But Daddy didn't do anything wrong. Garrett pulled her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences, but we're going to be okay. I promise. Her voice broke on the words. I don't want you to be sad. Garrett forced brightness he didn't feel. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I can't be sad when I have you. I'll always have you, baby girl. The walk across the production floor felt longer than it should. 82 workers, 81 now watched Garrett carry Bryn and his toolbox toward the exit. Some met his eyes with sympathy. Others looked away ashamed or fearful or both. A few muttered support too quiet for management to hear. Travis broke from his station crossing to Garrett despite regulations prohibiting it. The hug hit hard, all Irish-American intensity and genuine grief. Travis's voice came rough. This is complete bullshit, brother. Everyone here knows you're right. Garrett managed a smile that probably didn't reach his eyes. Take care of yourself, Trav, and please, watch Sector 4. Travis's expression hardened with determination. You got it. I promise. The December air bit cold after factory warmth. Garrett reached the gate with Bryn still clinging to him when the sound hit his ears. That whistling, the same high-pitched keen he'd heard earlier, but noticeably louder. Pressure building faster than prediction suggested. Every instinct Garrett possessed screamed at him to turn back. He set Bryn down gently. Baby, wait here with the guard for 30 seconds. Daddy needs to talk to someone. Bryn's fear was immediate. Daddy, no. Garrett squeezed her hand. Right back. I promise. He caught Sophia in the parking lot headed for her Mercedes. She had her phone to her ear, probably calling corporate with triumph reports about handling insubordinate employees. His shout carried across asphalt. Ms. Winters! She lowered the phone, annoyance crossing her features. Mr. Hayes, you've been terminated. Leave immediately or I'll call police for trespassing. Garrett closed the distance between them. Please, just 30 seconds. The sound in Sector 4, it's significantly worse than 90 minutes ago. Whatever's building is accelerating. I'm begging you, let me inspect one more time. 5 minutes. That's all. Sophia's expression held no give. What I see is a desperate man trying to manipulate his way back into employment. Footsteps behind him. Bryn had followed security guard trailing apologetically. She grabbed Sophia's sleeve, the child's hand so small against expensive fabric, and looked up with 7-year-old earnestness that couldn't be faked. Bryn's words tumbled out. Ms. Winters' daddy never lies, not ever. Last winter our house had a pipe making sounds like this. Daddy fixed it before it exploded. He saved our neighbor Mrs. Finch's basement, too. When Daddy hears bad sounds, he's always right. Something shifted in Sophia's eyes. For just a moment, her mask cracked completely. Garrett saw raw emotion beneath doubt, fear, maybe even recognition of truth. Her hand moved toward Bryn's hair, an aborted gesture of comfort or connection. Then the mask slammed back into place. Sophia's voice came cold enough to cause frostbite. Mr. Hayes, using your child to emotionally manipulate me is deplorable. You should be ashamed. Garrett felt like he'd been gutted. I'm not using her, she's just... Sophia turned to security. Escort them off property immediately. If either returns, file trespassing charges. The guard looked apologetic but firm. Come on, Garrett. Don't make this harder than it is. Garrett lifted Bryn, who was crying openly now, and walked to his truck. He didn't look back. Couldn't. The image of Sophia's face that moment when her humanity showed before she buried it would haunt him enough without additional reinforcement. Sophia watched them go, standing alone in the parking lot. Her hands shook so violently she had to clasp them together. She raised the phone back to her ear. Her voice came out not quite steady. Roger, yes. The facility tour went smoothly, no significant issues. The lie tasted like ash and copper, like blood and failure. like every compromise she'd ever made climbing corporate ladders. Garrett's rental house occupied a quiet street in Morrison's working-class neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, $11.50 monthly rent, maintained well enough but clearly inhabited by someone counting every dollar. The furniture was second-hand, but clean. Photos of Addison covered available surfaces, beautiful woman with blonde hair and infectious smile, frozen forever at 33. The mail sat on the kitchen table where Garrett had left it that morning. Bills he'd been avoiding looking at closely because numbers didn't improve with examination. The mortgage payment notice showed $1,785 due in 3 days. Medical bills from Addison's 18-month battle with cancer, bills that insurance had deemed unnecessary or experimental, totaled $10,940 remaining. Bryn's school winter program fee demanded $220 by January 5th. His bank account held $492.18. The math didn't work, hadn't worked for months. Garrett had been juggling payments, robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping everything barely functional through force of will and creative timing. Losing his job turned juggling into free fall. Bryn sat at the kitchen table, supposedly doing spelling homework. But her eyes kept drifting to her father, checking his expression, looking for reassurance that the world wasn't ending. Her question came quiet. "Daddy, are we gonna be okay?" Garrett forced a smile. Lying about this felt wrong, but 7-year-olds didn't need the crushing weight of adult financial terror. "Always, baby, Daddy promises." Bryn's next words hit harder. "Is it my fault you got fired because I talked to that lady?" Garrett moved to her side, immediately kneeling beside her chair. His hands found her shoulders, grip urgent. "No. Baby, never think that. You tried to help. That was brave and good and exactly what Mommy would want you to do." Tears rolled down Bryn's cheeks. "But she was so mean to us." Garrett pulled his daughter close, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "Yeah, sweetheart, she was. Some people build walls so high around themselves they forget how to come down." Bryn's voice came muffled against his shoulder. "That sounds really lonely." The 7-year-old wisdom surprised him. "Yeah, princess, it does." The television provided background noise while Garrett attempted dinner preparation. Local news at 5, mostly forgettable until the anchor's tone shifted to something grave. The anchor's voice carried weight. "Breaking development in the March industrial disaster in Allentown. Federal OSHA investigators today released their final report on the chemical plant explosion that killed 3 workers and injured 27. Garrett's hands froze over the box of pasta. Video footage showed twisted metal and shattered concrete. Destroyed lives rendered in high definition. A widow holding her husband's photo face ravaged by grief. Children too young to be orphaned crying at a funeral. The anchor continued. The report concludes the tragedy was completely preventable. Pressure system warnings were documented but systematically ignored by plant management for 6 weeks prior to catastrophe. The report specifically notes that experienced floor workers repeatedly raised concerns that were dismissed. Garrett's vision tunneled. His hands started shaking. The anchor's next words might have been scripted for him. OSHA Inspector Margaret Reynolds stated, "This is exactly why we require workers' safety concerns to be taken seriously. Experience matters. Lives depend on listening to people who know their systems." The pasta box slipped from Garrett's fingers, scattering penny across linoleum. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands, staring at the blank screen. He typed to Travis. "Brother, please check Sector 4 pressure tonight. I'm dead serious. Lives depend on this, trust me." His finger hovered over send. Sending this could get Travis fired, could destroy another family's income, could make Garrett responsible for someone else's financial ruin. Not sending could kill Travis, could kill Melissa Ashford, could kill Keith Sullivan. could kill 40 people working night shift who trusted that their safety mattered to someone. Garrett hit send. The message showed delivered. No response came. Morrison Manufacturing's night shift started at 6 p.m. Keith Sullivan took command of operations with the careful attention of someone who followed rules because rules prevented chaos. 44 years old, thinning brown hair belly suggesting too many years of sedentary work. Keith had survived 3 rounds of layoffs by being reliable, punctual, and scrupulously by the book. Melissa Ashford handed off control room operations with practiced efficiency. 28 blonde ponytail perpetually pulled too tight from small-town Ohio where factory work meant stability and future. She'd been at Morrison Manufacturing for 3 years, still believing hard work got rewarded. Her handoff report came precise. Sector 4 showing minor fluctuations all day, currently reading 113%, nothing critical. Keith frowned at the number. That's 13% over spec. Melissa pulled up her tablet. Ms. Winters sent memo to all supervisors this afternoon. She read directly from screen. Focus on productivity metrics. Do not authorize unnecessary shutdowns without explicit approval. Operational efficiency is paramount. Keith's gut twisted. 13% over spec wasn't technically dangerous, but it wasn't normal either. And the memory of Garrett Hayes being fired that morning, fired for raising similar concerns, hung heavy in his mind. His response came careful. Keep monitoring. Alert me if it hits 120. Melissa nodded, gathering her things. Will do. Have a quiet night. But quiet nights rarely stayed that way. Sophia's hotel suite occupied the 14th floor of Morrison's nicest hotel, which qualified as 3-star by generous assessment. The corporate card covered $425 nightly for generic luxury acceptable furniture, decent Wi-Fi, room service that arrived lukewarm. The wine from the minibar cost $14 and tasted like it. Her laptop displayed Morrison Manufacturing's financial projections. The numbers told stories of decline in efficiency, wasted potential. Fixing this facility would require ruthless decisions. More terminations beyond Garrett Hayes, equipment upgrades that workers would resist, process changes that would eliminate positions. Sophia knew how to read spreadsheets. She'd built her career on translating data into action, sentiment into strategy. Emotions didn't appear in quarterly reports. Feelings didn't influence stock prices. So why did her hands shake holding the wine glass? Her phone rang. Wallace Hartwell's name appeared on screen. 63 years old, her father's best friend, the closest thing to family she had left after her father's death 2 years ago. Board member mentor, the person who'd pushed for her promotion to operations director, when others questioned whether she had the necessary ruthlessness. His voice came through warm but probing. Sophia, heard you terminated someone on day 1. Making a statement to the workforce. Sophia's response came automatic. He was insubordinate. Wallace's silence carried weight. Then, or he was right and you were too proud to hear it. The accusation stung. He had no concrete data to support, Wallace interrupted gently. I remember when you were 26, your first major project. You insisted that supply chain reorganization would work despite warnings from logistics people who'd been doing it for decades. Cost us $4 million before you admitted the flaw. Sophia felt her face flush despite being alone. This is different. Wallace's voice carried affection mixed with warning. Is it? Or does this man remind you there are things your degrees don't teach? Your father built his fortune on numbers, yes, but he also listened to men who knew their craft. Pride is expensive, Sophia, sometimes deadly. Don't confuse confidence with wisdom. The call ended. Sophia sat alone with her laptop and her wine and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. She pulled up Garrett Hayes's personnel file. The photo showed serious face, kind eyes, hands that worked for living. 12 years perfect safety record. 3 formal commendations for preventing incidents. 0 disciplinary actions before today, the kind of employee any facility would want. Security footage from that morning played on her screen. Garrett fixing her car with competent hands. The gentle way he explained things to his daughter. His refusal of payment despite obvious financial need. His dignity in the face of her condescension. Sophia reached for her phone. Garrett's number existed in HR files. She could call, apologize, ask him to return for inspection. Admit she'd acted hastily, let ego override judgment. Her finger hovered over the call button. Everything in her screamed to make that call. Every instinct suggested Garrett Hayes was exactly the kind of person she should listen to. His concern was genuine. His experience mattered. His warning deserved investigation. But calling him meant admitting weakness. Meant showing the workforce that their new operations director could be swayed by emotional appeals. Corporate would hear about it. Her position, fought for, earned through years of ruthless competition, would become vulnerable. Sophia set the phone down without calling. The decision would haunt her. Back in Garrett's small house, bedtime routines provided familiar comfort in a day gone catastrophically wrong. Bryn brushed her teeth, put on pajamas decorated with cartoon animals, climbed into bed with her stuffed elephant. Garrett sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing blonde hair back from her forehead. "You okay, princess?" Bryn's question came with 7-year-old directness. "Daddy, will that lady ever stop being mean?" Garrett considered lying, decided against it. "I don't know, baby. Some people are so scared of being wrong they can't hear what's right anymore." Bryn processed this with unusual gravity. "That's really sad." Garrett kissed her forehead. "It is." Bryn's arms went around his neck. "I'm glad you're not like that, Daddy." The simple statement threatened to break him. "Sleep tight, princess. Love you to the moon." Bryn's response came automatic from years of repetition. "And back, Daddy, times infinity." Garrett turned off her light, leaving the door cracked the way she liked. Then he went to the living room and collapsed onto the second-hand couch that sagged in the middle. The photo on the mantel showed Addison on their wedding day. 28 years old, radiant in a dress they'd found at a consignment shop, flowers from the grocery store ceremony at the courthouse because they couldn't afford anything elaborate. The happiest day of his life before Bryn was born. His voice came out barely above whisper. "Did I do the right thing, Addie? Did I teach her what you wanted, or did I just make everything worse?" Addison's photo didn't answer. Never would. Garrett sat alone in the dark, phone silent on the coffee table, clock ticking toward 9 p.m. Somewhere across town, night shift worked. Somewhere in Sector 4, pressure climbed. Somewhere disaster approached on mechanical inevitability. And nobody listened. Travis Brennan's phone vibrated during his dinner break at 7:15 p.m. The text from Garrett appeared simple, direct, carrying urgency that transcended the limitations of digital communication. Travis read it twice, setting down the sandwich that suddenly tasted like cardboard. He glanced around the break room. 2 other mechanics ate in silence, exhausted from 9 hours already logged. Night shift meant skeleton crew, minimum personnel to keep operations running while Morrison Manufacturing's executive offices stood dark and empty. Travis pocketed his phone and grabbed his toolbox. Whatever Garrett warned about deserved investigation. 12 years of friendship meant trusting instincts even when they contradicted official policy. Sector 4 hummed with industrial rhythm at night. Fewer workers meant the mechanical sounds dominated steam, hissing through pipes, pressure relief valves, cycling the deep thrumming vibration of systems pushing rated capacity. Travis walked the main pressure line, trying to hear what Garrett had detected that morning. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Background noise masked subtleties. But Travis had learned from Garrett, who'd learned from Jimmy Kowalski. He pressed his ear against the 24-inch mainline metal cold against his cheek and filtered out irrelevant sound. There, faint but distinct, high-pitched whistling that shouldn't exist in properly functioning systems, the kind of sound that meant pressure finding pathways it wasn't supposed to find. Travis pulled back and checked the gauge. 116%. 3 hours ago, Garrett reported 109%. 7% increase in less than 4 hours suggested acceleration, not steady climb. His stomach dropped. Travis pulled out his phone, calling the control room. Keith Sullivan answered on the second ring voice, carrying the practiced calm of someone monitoring dozens of systems simultaneously. Travis kept his voice level. "Keith, this is Travis. Need to shut down Sector 4 right now." Keith's hesitation transmitted clearly across the connection. "What's the problem?" Travis chose his words carefully. "Pressure irregularities. Acoustic signature suggesting internal blockage. Garrett flagged it this morning before—" He couldn't finish that sentence before Sophia Winters destroyed a good man's career. Keith's voice tightened. Travis Garrett was terminated for raising exactly these concerns. "Ms. Winters was very clear," Travis interrupted, frustration bleeding through. "I don't care what she was clear about. I'm telling you something's wrong. This matches the pre-failure pattern from Pennsylvania." The mention of Pennsylvania carried weight. Every mechanic in the region knew about Allentown. 3 dead, 27 injured, families destroyed because management ignored warnings. Keith's response came slower. "Sensors show 116%, still technically within tolerance." Travis cut him off. "Barely within tolerance, and climbing fast. At minimum, come down here and verify yourself." Long pause. Travis heard typing, Keith accessing system logs, comparing current readings to historical data. Keith's voice shifted, professional concern replacing bureaucratic caution. "I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't touch anything." 5 minutes became 8. Keith needed to log the concern, notify his immediate supervisor per protocol, document the decision trail in case corporate asked questions later. Every minute of delay meant pressure climbing higher. When Keith finally reached Sector 4, Travis was rechecking auxiliary systems. Temperature readings showed 9 degrees above normal. Relief valve response time had degraded to 3.1 seconds. Vibration frequencies indicated turbulent flow where laminar flow should exist. Keith pressed his ear to the main line, listened for 20 seconds, straightened with expression gone pale. "Jesus, that's not normal." Travis gestured to the gauge. 118 now, up 2% since I called you. Keith pulled out his tablet, accessing shutdown protocols. Initiating emergency shutdown sequence. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. The system should respond within seconds. Automated valves redirecting flow pressure, bleeding off through relief systems, temperature normalizing as steam flow decreased. Instead, the tablet displayed an error message in angry red text. "System conflict detected. Manual override required." Keith stared at the screen. "What the hell?" Travis leaned over his shoulder, reading the error code. "What's that mean?" Keith tried the command again. Same error. He attempted alternate shutdown pathways. Each returned identical rejection. His voice carried genuine fear now. "Something's blocking the automated shutdown. Melissa, this is Keith. What software updates were pushed in the last 48 hours?" Melissa Ashford's response came through his radio, confusion evident. "Checking. Okay, there's one major update. Efficiency Optimization Protocol version 2. Pushed yesterday afternoon by— oh God, by Ms. Winters' direct authorization." Keith's face drained of color. "What does it do?" Melissa's voice shook as she read. It's designed to minimize energy waste by optimizing pressure cycles and preventing unnecessary venting. It treats pressure release as inefficiency and blocks relief protocols unless manual override is... Her voice trailed off as realization hit. Keith, it's preventing the safety systems from functioning. Travis watched the gauge tick to 120%. How do we override? Keith was already moving, heading for the manual control station. There's a physical bypass, but at this pressure level... He didn't finish. They both knew. Manual intervention at critical pressure meant being in the blast radius if catastrophic failure occurred. The plant-wide alarm system activated with electronic shrieking. Red lights strobed across Sector 4 emergency protocol, triggering automatically as sensors detected pressure exceeding safety thresholds. Keith's voice cut through alarm noise. Melissa, initiate full facility evacuation. Everyone out, now. Workers appeared from various stations, moving with practiced efficiency toward emergency exits. Night shift meant fewer people, but each person represented a life. A family, responsibilities beyond these walls. Travis stayed at Keith's side. I'm not leaving. Keith didn't argue. Help me with the manual systems. They worked together, bypassing electronic controls, accessing mechanical backups that dated to the facility's original construction. But the pressure kept climbing. 125%, 130%. The whistling became audible without pressing ears to metal, cutting through alarm cacophony. Pipes vibrated visibly now. Stress fractures appeared in Weld's hairline, cracks that would become ruptures if pressure continued unchecked. Keith pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I'm calling Ms. Winters. Sophia's hotel room phone rang at 10:07 p.m. She'd been reviewing Morrison Manufacturing personnel files, identifying additional positions for elimination, calculating cost savings from reduced headcount. The spreadsheet glowed on her laptop, numbers comforting in their objectivity. The plant emergency line displayed on her phone. Sophia's heart rate kicked up before she consciously registered why. Emergency lines didn't ring for minor issues. Her voice came out controlled. This is Sophia Winters. Keith's panic transmitted clearly despite his attempts at professional composure. Ms. Winters, we have a critical situation in Sector 4. Pressure currently at 135% and climbing rapidly. Automated shutdown systems have failed. Your software update is blocking safety protocols. We've evacuated the facility, but if this line breaches... He didn't need to finish. Catastrophic failure at 135% meant explosion, fire, potential casualties. Sophia felt the hotel room tilt. Her wine glass fell from nerveless fingers. Red liquid spreading across expensive carpet like blood. Her voice barely functioned. How is this possible? Keith's response came tight. The efficiency optimization algorithm you authorized. It's treating pressure release as waste and blocking relief valve operation. We've tried every electronic override. Nothing works. We need manual intervention, but at this pressure. Again, the sentence died unfinished. Sophia's mind raced through implications. Garrett Hayes had warned her. 12 hours ago, he'd stood in that conference room and predicted exactly this scenario. She'd called him paranoid reactionary, a middle-aged man manufacturing crisis for relevance. And she'd fired him. Her software update pushed through without adequate testing because she wanted to impress corporate with immediate efficiency gains was killing people. Memories crashed over her. That morning, Garrett fixing her car with competent hands. His daughter's innocent face pleading for her father. Garrett's final words echoing with prophetic weight. Blood doesn't wash off conscience. Sophia grabbed her purse, phone, car keys. Current pressure reading. Keith's voice shook. 140%. Rate of increase is accelerating. We have maybe 15-20 minutes before structural failure. Sophia was already running for the elevator. I'm 10 minutes away. Keep trying manual overrides, and Keith... Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, this is my fault, all of it. She ended the call, hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped the phone. The drive to Morrison Manufacturing blurred into nightmare sequence, empty roads, streetlights streaking past her Mercedes pushing 90 miles per hour through residential zones where speed limits topped 35. Sophia's mind replayed every interaction with Garrett Hayes, each moment she'd chosen ego over expertise, pride over precaution. She'd built her career on being right, ruthlessly, objectively right. Numbers didn't lie. Data told truth. Sentiment was weakness that successful people eliminated. But Garrett Hayes had been right. His experience, his intuition, his 12 years listening to machines, all valid data she'd dismissed because it didn't fit her preconceptions. Because acknowledging his expertise meant admitting her ignorance. People were going to die because of her arrogance. The thought threatened to paralyze her. Sophia forced it aside, focusing on immediate action. Manual overrides, emergency protocols, whatever could be salvaged from catastrophe she'd created. But another thought kept surfacing, unwelcome and insistent. Garrett would know what to do. Garrett had worked those systems for 12 years. Garrett understood pressure dynamics in ways her MBA never taught. Garrett, whom she'd destroyed that morning. Her phone sat in the cup holder. His number existed in HR files she'd accessed. One call could bring him back, could tap expertise that might prevent disaster. But calling him meant admitting she'd been completely catastrophically wrong, meant begging help from a man she'd humiliated, meant showing vulnerability to someone who had every reason to let her fail. Sophia's pride warred with desperation. At 165% pressure, desperation won. Her trembling fingers found his contact. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe he'd see her name and let it go to voicemail, enjoying the poetic justice of her pleading with slants. On the 4th ring, Garrett answered. His voice carried wariness, exhaustion, resignation. "Ms. Winters." Sophia's carefully prepared speech disintegrated. "Garrett, Mr. Hayes, Her voice broke completely. Professional composure shattered under the weight of terror and guilt and desperate need. She started again, forcing words through constricted throat. "You were right. Sector 4 is critical. 165% pressure and climbing. Automated systems failed because of my software update. We've evacuated, but we can't shut it down. My mistake is killing people, and The words caught. "I need your help. Please." Silence on the line. Sophia heard background noise, television, maybe sounds of normal evening at home, the life she'd destroyed that morning. When Garrett spoke, his voice had shifted. The wary exhaustion vanished, replaced by focused intensity. "Current readings." Sophia's brain latched onto concrete questions, lifeline in drowning panic. 165%. Keith says rate of increase is accelerating. Maybe 15 minutes before breach. More silence. Sophia imagined Garrett thinking mental calculations, running through scenarios and solutions built from 12 years' experience. His next question came precise. "Manual bypass accessible." Sophia had no idea. "Keith's at the plant. He's trying—" Garrett cut her off. "Put Keith on speaker when I arrive. I'll be there in 18 minutes. The statement registered slowly. "You're coming." Something in Garrett's voice softened fractionally. "People's lives are at stake. That matters more than—" He paused. "More than everything else. Keep everyone away from Sector 4. I mean everyone. At this pressure, if it goes, the blast radius is 200 feet minimum." Sophia's throat closed completely. "Garrett, I don't deserve your help. What I did to you—" His response came quiet but carrying absolute conviction. "This isn't about what you deserve, it's about what's right. Now let me go so I can get there." The line went dead. Sophia gripped the steering wheel hard enough to hurt vision, blurring with tears she couldn't afford to shed. Not yet. Not until this was over. Not until she knew whether her arrogance had killed people or whether Garrett Hayes' expertise could pull salvation from her catastrophic failure. Garrett stood in his living room, phone still in hand, heart hammering against ribs. The decision had taken approximately 3 seconds. Long enough to recognize the stakes, short enough that doubt couldn't intervene. Bryn slept in the next room. Safe, warm, dreaming 7-year-old dreams that didn't include industrial disasters and father's mortality. If he went back to that plant, if the worst happened while he was attempting manual override at critical pressure, Bryn would wake up an orphan. The thought threatened to paralyze him. Addison's voice echoed from 3 years past, from hospital room conversations when morphine barely touched her pain. Her hands had gripped his with desperate strength. Addison's words carved permanent into memory. "Promise me you'll take care of our baby. She needs her father. Promise me, Garrett." He'd promised. Through tears and breaking heart, he'd promised. But Addison had also said other things. Earlier memories before cancer stole her strength. Conversations on their porch while Bryn played in the yard. Discussions about values and legacy and what kind of man Garrett wanted to be. Her voice came clear across years. "You're good, Garrett. Truly good. That's why I love you. You do what's right even when it costs you. Even when it's hard. That's the man I want raising our daughter. That's what I want her to learn." Garrett looked at the photo on the mantel. Addison on their wedding day, radiant with joy and hope and love. She'd known who he was when she married him. Known he'd run toward danger if it meant protecting others. Known he couldn't ignore people in peril without destroying fundamental pieces of himself. If he stayed home, stayed safe, let Morrison Manufacturing explode because preserving his own life mattered more than 40 workers. Bryn would have a father. But what kind of father? What kind of man? The answer came with crystalline clarity. He couldn't teach Bryn courage if he chose cowardice. Couldn't teach her integrity if he abandoned principles when they became inconvenient. Couldn't teach her that people mattered if he valued his own safety above their lives. Garrett moved to Bryn's room, entering quietly. She slept peacefully, stuffed elephant clutched, tight blonde hair spread across pillows. So small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on him for everything. He knelt beside her bed, brushing hair back from her forehead with gentle fingers. His throat closed, seeing how much she looked like Addison. Same bone structure, same unconscious expressions, same spirit that made both of them better than he deserved. Garrett pulled out his phone, typing quickly before courage could fail. Mrs. Eleanor Finch lived 3 houses down. Widowed 10 years, the kind of neighbor who'd helped when Addison was dying and Garrett couldn't manage everything alone. The text message kept it simple. "Eleanor, emergency at plant. Life or death. Can you come stay with Bryn, please?" Response came within 30 seconds. "On my way." Garrett found paper and pen in Bryn's homework folder. His handwriting shook as he wrote words that might be final message to his daughter. "Bryn, if you're reading this and Daddy didn't come home, I need you to know something important. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every single day with you has been a gift. You made the hard days worth it. You gave me purpose when I lost Mommy. You are my whole heart. Be strong, princess. Be kind. Be brave. Remember what Daddy always said, doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Forever and always, Daddy." He placed the note on her nightstand, where she'd see it immediately upon waking. Then he kissed her forehead, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence one more time. Bryn stirred slightly. "Daddy!" Garrett's voice came out strangled. "Shh, princess, just checking on you. Go back to sleep." She settled immediately, trust absolute. Garrett stood watching her for 10 seconds that felt like eternity, memorizing every detail. Then he forced himself to leave before resolve crumbled. Eleanor Finch arrived as he reached the front door. 65, gray hair and curler's bathrobe over sensible pajamas. She took one look at Garrett's face and asked no questions. Her hug conveyed understanding, concern, prayer. "Go do what needs doing. I'll watch over your girl." Garrett's toolbox sat in the truck bed. He'd cleaned it out that afternoon, bitter ceremony of unemployment. Now he grabbed it, muscle memory checking that essential tools remained: wrenches, pliers, emergency override keys that officially didn't exist but every experienced mechanic kept anyway. The Ford's engine coughed to life. Garrett backed out of his driveway, watching his house shrink in the rearview mirror. The porch light Eleanor turned on made it look warm. Safe, permanent. Everything he might be leaving behind. The drive to Morrison Manufacturing took 16 minutes. Garrett pushed the truck harder than mechanically advisable engine, protesting speeds it wasn't designed for. The roads were empty December night, cold enough that sensible people stayed inside. His mind ran through scenarios, calculating possibilities. Manual override at 165% pressure meant working directly at the system's weakest point. One wrong move, one miscalculation, 1 second of bad timing, and catastrophic failure would occur with him in the blast radius. But he'd studied those systems for 12 years, understood pressure dynamics intimately, knew which valves to manipulate, which sequences to follow, how to bleed pressure gradually instead of triggering explosive decompression. Theory was clean. Reality involved human error, equipment, age factors beyond control. Garrett's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Fear lived permanent in his gut now, cold and heavy. But fear didn't eliminate choice. Courage wasn't absence of fear. Courage was acting despite terror because the alternative was unacceptable. Morrison Manufacturing appeared ahead, emergency lights strobing red and blue. Fire trucks, ambulances, police vehicles, full disaster response staging for catastrophe that hadn't happened yet. Workers clustered in parking lot, evacuated from danger but unable to leave completely. These were their livelihoods, their identities, their futures at stake. Garrett pulled into the lot. His ancient Ford looked absurd among emergency vehicles, rust and primer patches screaming poverty and obsolescence. Sophia Winters stood at the main entrance, illuminated by emergency lights. Her designer suit was rumpled now, hair escaping from its severe style, makeup smudged. The polished executive from that morning had vanished, replaced by a woman on the edge of complete breakdown. Their eyes met across 50 feet of asphalt. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, too soon, too complicated, but recognition. Acknowledgement of shared humanity, mutual fear, desperate hope that disaster could still be averted. Garrett walked toward her, toolbox in hand, every step conscious choice. He could still turn around, could let Sophia Winters live with consequences of her arrogance, could go home to Bryn in safety. But that wasn't who he was. Sophia's voice came out raw. "Garrett, thank God. I thought—" He moved past her toward the entrance. "Where's Keith?" Sophia followed, practically running to keep pace. "Control room. Pressure's at 178 now. He says maybe 10 minutes before—" Garrett cut her off. "Save it. We don't have time." They entered Morrison Manufacturing's familiar space, transformed by emergency lighting and alarm sirens into something alien. The building that had been Garrett's second home for 12 years felt hostile now, machinery thrumming with barely contained destruction. The control room blazed with warning lights. Keith Sullivan looked up as Garrett entered, relief flooding his features. "Garrett, Jesus, am I glad to see you." Garrett moved to the control panel, eyes scanning readouts with practiced speed. Pressure 182%, temperature critical, vibration analysis approaching failure threshold. Every indicator screamed imminent catastrophe. His voice came calm despite circumstances. Talk me through what you've tried. Keith launched into technical explanation detailing every attempted shutdown sequence, every override that failed, every workaround that Sophia's optimization software blocked. Garrett listened with complete focus, mental model building of system state. Pressure, distribution, failure points. When Keith finished, Garrett nodded once. Okay, manual override it is. Sophia's voice came from behind him, small and broken. Garrett, at this pressure level, if something goes wrong... He turned to face her. Their eyes met and something shifted. The anger from that morning, the humiliation, the betrayal, all present but somehow secondary to larger truth. They were two people trying to prevent tragedy. Everything else could wait. Garrett's response came quiet. If something goes wrong, it won't matter where I am. Blast radius at 182% takes out half the building. I'm going in because I'm the only one here who knows those systems well enough to maybe pull this off. Not because I'm brave, because I'm the only option. Sophia's tears finally broke through. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not listening, for firing you, for creating this disaster. Garrett held up one hand, stopping her. Later. Right now, Keith needs to coordinate from here. You need to make sure everyone stays clear of Sector 4. And I need to go turn a very dangerous wheel at exactly the right speed or we all die. He walked out of the control room without waiting for response toolbox in hand, heading toward Sector 4 and whatever fate waited there. Behind him, Sophia Winters stood frozen, watching him disappear into the building's depths. Watching him walk toward potential death to fix her mistake. Watching real courage in motion. She whispered to empty air, voice breaking. Please come back. Sector 4 at night resembled something from industrial nightmare. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across pipe networks, turning familiar equipment into alien landscape. The alarm's electronic scream provided constant soundtrack to approaching catastrophe. But underneath that manufactured urgency ran something worse. The mechanical shrieking of metal pushed beyond design limits. Garrett heard it the moment he entered. That whistling had evolved into full roar pressure, finding every microscopic weakness in aging infrastructure, exploiting gaps that shouldn't exist. The sound carried physical weight, vibration transmitted through concrete floor into his boots, up his legs, settling in his chest like foreboding made tangible. The pressure gauge showed 185%, 8% increase since Sophia's phone call 18 minutes ago. The acceleration curve was steepening, approaching the exponential growth that preceded structural failure. Garrett moved to the manual override housing with deliberate calm. Panic served no purpose. Fear was passenger now, along for the ride, but not driving. His hands knew this equipment intimately, had serviced these systems hundreds of times over 12 years. Muscle memory could compensate for terror. The housing unit enclosed the main bypass wheel, emergency mechanical backup from an era when engineers designed redundancy into critical systems. The wheel itself was 3 feet in diameter, cast iron, connected to valve mechanisms through direct mechanical linkage. No electronics, no software, no optimization algorithms, just metal and physics and human strength. At normal pressure, turning this wheel required moderate effort. At 185%, the resistance would be immense. And if catastrophic failure occurred while he was locked in physical struggle with the mechanism, Garrett pushed the thought away. He keyed his radio voice steady despite circumstances. Keith, I'm in position. On my mark, engage secondary relief valve to take some load off the main line. Keith's response came immediate. Roger that. Standing by. Garrett removed the safety housing panels, revealing the bypass wheel. Steam leaked from microfractures in surrounding pipes, hot enough to scald exposed skin. He pulled work gloves from his pocket, inadequate protection but better than nothing. His hands gripped the wheel. The metal felt alive, thrumming with barely contained energy. 185% pressure translated to forces that could tear human bodies apart, reduce industrial equipment to shrapnel turn. Solid infrastructure into explosive projectiles. Garrett took 3 deep breaths, centering himself, focusing past fear into pure mechanical understanding. Pressure dynamics, valve sequencing, timing requirements, all the technical knowledge Jimmy Kowalski had beaten into him over 2 years of apprenticeship. Jimmy's voice echoed across 12 years' Polish accent, thick with urgency from that final conversation before the explosion. Listen to machines, Garrett. They tell you truth if you pay attention. Numbers lie sometimes. People lie always. But machines are honest. Garrett's voice came clear into the radio. Mark! Keith engaged the secondary relief valve. The system hissed as pressure found alternate pathway load, distributing across redundant systems. The gauge dropped fractionally 183%. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But it created a window. Garrett threw his weight against the bypass wheel. Resistance hit like trying to move a mountain. The wheel refused to budge, pressure fighting every millimeter of potential rotation. Muscles in his arms, shoulders, back, all engaged simultaneously. Physical labor for 12 years had built strength that gym workouts couldn't replicate. But even that barely sufficed. The wheel moved. 1 degree, then another. Each increment of rotation opening the bypass valve, fractionally creating additional pressure relief pathway. Sweat poured down Garrett's face despite December cold. His muscles screamed, protest tendons straining against forces they weren't designed to withstand. The work gloves provided minimal purchase palms, slipping slightly on metal worn smooth by decades of use. But he couldn't stop, couldn't rest. Momentum mattered. Once the wheel started turning, maintaining motion required less force than restarting. Keith's voice crackled through static. Pressure dropping, 180, 178. Garrett kept turning. Every degree of rotation mattered. Every fractional pressure reduction decreased catastrophic failure probability. The math was simple: stay alive long enough to bleed sufficient pressure that automated systems could handle remainder. Then the sound changed. Sharp, metallic crack echoed through Sector 4, loud enough to penetrate alarm noise. Garrett froze, every instinct screaming danger. Was that the main line rupturing, a weld failing? The beginning of cascade failure that would kill him and destroy the facility? Keith's panicked voice. Garrett, what was that? Garrett forced himself to breathe, to think, to analyze instead of react. The pressure gauge still showed 175%, decreasing, not increasing. If the main line had breached, pressure would spike before catastrophic decompression. His voice came steady. Pressure seal breaking, normal part of relief sequence, keep monitoring. Normal was generous interpretation, but technically accurate. As pressure bled through bypass systems, mechanical seals that had held beyond design limits were releasing. Controlled failure instead of explosive failure. Frightening but not fatal. Yet. Garrett resumed turning the wheel. His arms felt like they might detach from his shoulders. Muscles burned with lactic acid buildup. His back spasmed, threatening to lock completely. But stopping meant pressure rebuilding, momentum lost, disaster deferred but not prevented. Keith's updates provided rhythm. 170, 165, 160. The resistance eased fractionally. Still immense, but trending toward merely impossible instead of absolutely impossible. Garrett's breathing came in ragged gasps now. Cardiovascular system pushed beyond sustainable limits, but 160% was threshold. Below that, automated systems could engage. Below that, cascade failure became improbable instead of inevitable. Below that, he might actually survive this. Another crack. louder this time. Garrett felt it through the wheel vibration transmitted up his arms. Somewhere in the pipe network, metal was giving way, hopefully in controlled manner, hopefully pressure releasing through designed pathways instead of creating unintended ones. The gauge hit 155%. Garrett risked stopping rotation to reassess. His arms trembled violently, adrenaline crash beginning before crisis fully resolved. The bypass wheel had rotated approximately 40 degrees, enough to open the valve substantially but not completely. Keith's voice carried cautious hope. Pressure stabilizing. 152, holding steady. Automated systems engaging. Electronic hums filled Sector 4 as safety protocols kicked in, software finally able to override Sophia's optimization algorithm now that pressure had dropped below critical threshold. Relief valves throughout the network activated distributed pressure bleeding across multiple pathways. The gauge continued dropping. 145%, 138%, 125%. The roaring whistle diminished to manageable hiss. Pipe vibrations decreased from violent shaking to normal operational tremor. Temperature readings began normalizing as steam flow stabilized. Garrett stepped back from the bypass wheel, legs suddenly unreliable. He grabbed a support beam to stay upright, entire body shaking from exertion and adrenaline dump and sheer overwhelming relief. Keith's voice came through the radio, cracking with emotion. "You did it! Jesus Christ, Garrett, you actually did it!" Garrett managed to key his radio with trembling hands. "System stable." A pause while Keith verified multiple readings. Pressure at 120 and dropping, all automated systems responding normally, temperature normalizing, vibration within acceptable parameters. We're good. We're actually good. Garrett slid down to sit on concrete floor back against the support beam. His arms hung useless at his sides, muscles completely spent. His heart hammered against ribs, pulse racing from exertion that had pushed his 46-year-old body well beyond safe limits. But he was alive. The plant was intact. 40 workers would go home to their families tonight. Bryn wouldn't wake up an orphan. The realization hit delayed shock wearing off to reveal emotional impact beneath. Garrett's hands started shaking worse. Full-body tremors that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with confronting mortality and finding it more negotiable than expected. The walk from Sector 4 back to the control room took twice as long as it should. Garrett's legs protested, each step muscles announcing they were done cooperating for the evening. His toolbox felt like it weighed 100 pounds despite containing maybe 20. He emerged into Morrison Manufacturing's main area to find workers clustered near the entrance, too far from actual danger but unable to leave completely. They saw him approaching and spontaneous applause erupted. People he'd worked alongside for 12 years. Some he knew well and others barely at all, clapping and cheering like he'd scored the winning touchdown instead of merely prevented industrial disaster. Travis broke from the crowd, crossing the distance in 3 strides to wrap Garrett in hug that compressed already abused ribs. "Brother, I thought when we heard that crack, I thought you were dead." Garrett returned the embrace despite exhaustion. "Takes more than angry steam to kill me." The joke fell flat, fear too recent for humor to land. Properly, Travis pulled back, hands gripping Garrett's shoulders, eyes searching his face. "You're okay. Really okay." Garrett managed to smile. "I'll hurt tomorrow, but yeah, I'm okay." More workers approached, offering thanks and congratulations and expressing relief that verged on religious fervor. Garrett accepted it all with growing discomfort. He'd done what needed doing. Nothing heroic, just competent response to emergency situation. The fact that he was the only one with sufficient expertise to attempt it didn't make the action itself remarkable. But he needed to call Bryn, needed to hear her voice confirm to himself that going back to that plant had been right choice. Garrett extracted himself from well-wishers moving toward quieter corner of the facility. His phone showed 11:18 p.m. Late enough that Bryn might be asleep, but Eleanor would still be awake, probably worried sick. The call connected on first ring. Eleanor's voice came through tight with anxiety. "Garrett!" The simple relief in hearing her say his name hit harder than expected. "It's me. I'm okay. Everything's okay." Eleanor's exhale transmitted clearly across the connection. "Thank the Lord. Bryn woke up about 20 minutes ago worried about you. She's right here." Rustling sounds. Then Bryn's voice, small and frightened and so achingly young. "Daddy." Garrett's throat closed completely. He managed to push words through anyway. "Hi, Princess, I'm fine. Just had some work to finish at the plant." Bryn's tears were audible. "Mrs. Finch said you had an emergency. I was so scared." Garrett closed his eyes, leaning against cold concrete wall, letting his daughter's voice anchor him to reality beyond crisis management and pressure systems and mortality. "I know, baby. But Daddy's okay. Everything's okay. I'll be home soon and we'll have pancakes for breakfast. How's that sound?" Bryn's voice steadied slightly. "With chocolate chips." The normalcy of the question nearly broke him. "With all the chocolate chips you want." They talked for another minute, Bryn's fear gradually subsiding as Garrett's calm reassurance penetrated. When he finally ended the call, promising to be home within the hour, his face was wet with tears he hadn't noticed crying. Sophia found him there, still leaning against the wall, phone in hand. Defenses completely shattered. She approached cautiously, like approaching wounded animal that might bolt. Her voice came soft. "That was your daughter?" Garrett nodded, not trusting his voice immediately. Sophia stood beside him, maintaining careful distance. "What you did tonight, I don't have words. Thank you feels pathetically inadequate." Garrett straightened, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "People needed help. I was qualified to provide it. Nothing complicated." Sophia's laugh came bitter. "Nothing complicated. You risked your life to fix a disaster I created. After I fired you, after I humiliated you, after I dismissed everything you tried to tell me." Garrett finally met her eyes. The polished executive from that morning had completely dissolved. This woman looked hollowed out, stripped of armor, vulnerable in ways that transcended professional context. His response came quieter than intended. "You called when it mattered, that's what counts." Sophia shook her head, tears threatening again. "I called because I had no choice. You came because you're a good man. There's a difference." Keith's voice interrupted from across the facility. "Garrett, we need comprehensive system inspection before we can restart operations. That's going to take hours. You up for it?" Garrett pushed off from the wall, exhaustion hitting in waves. "Yeah, let's do it." Sophia moved to follow. "I'll help." Garrett stopped, turning to face her. "You don't know these systems." Something defiant flickered in Sophia's expression. "Then teach me, please. I need to understand what I almost destroyed, what you saved." They worked through the night. Garrett led teams of mechanics through Sector 4, examining every pipe joint, testing every valve, verifying structural integrity of systems pushed far beyond rated capacity. The inspection required meticulous attention, checking for hairline fractures that could become catastrophic failures if overlooked. Sophia stayed at his side, taking notes, asking questions, listening with intensity that suggested she was memorizing every word. Her expensive suit became progressively more ruined, grease stains, steam damage, concrete dust, but she never complained, never suggested delegating to subordinates. Travis worked nearby, occasionally catching Garrett's eye with expressions that mixed approval and amusement. The unspoken message was clear: Ice Queen was melting. Around 2 a.m., Garrett called mandatory break. Workers scattered to the break room seeking coffee and vending machine food. Garrett collapsed into a metal folding chair, every muscle screaming protest. Sophia sat across from him, looking equally destroyed. Someone had brought coffee in styrofoam cups that tasted like burnt cardboard, but provided desperately needed caffeine. Her question came soft. How did you learn all this? The pressure dynamics, the system behaviors, everything. Garrett took long swallow of terrible coffee. Man named Jimmy Kowalski. Taught me when I started here 12 years ago. Best mechanic I ever met. Understood machines like they spoke to him. Sophia processed this. Past tense. Garrett's jaw tightened. Died in a plant explosion in Indiana 12 years ago. Management ignored his warnings about pressure system failures. 3 workers died total, 27 injured. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. That's why you were so adamant. This wasn't abstract for you. Garrett met her gaze directly. Jimmy grabbed my hand as he was dying. Told me he should have stopped the line, should have made them listen. I promised myself I'd never let it happen again. That I'd always speak up, always push back, even if it cost me. Sophia's voice came barely audible. It did cost you. I made sure of that. The accusation hung between them, truth neither could deny. But Garrett found himself without anger for it. Exhaustion had burned away everything except bare honesty. His words came measured. You made a mistake, a big one, but you owned it when it counted. You called me instead of trying to handle it yourself. That took courage. Sophia's laugh came harsh. Calling you was self-preservation, not courage. I was terrified. Garrett shook his head. Courage isn't absence of fear. It's acting right despite being terrified. You could have blamed others, could have run, could have covered up your software's role. Instead, you admitted fault and asked for help. That matters. Sophia stared at him like he'd spoken foreign language. How are you not furious with me after everything? Garrett interrupted gently. I'm too tired to be angry, and honestly, you'll punish yourself worse than I ever could. I can see it already. You're going to carry this night forever. The accuracy of the statement showed on Sophia's face. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. They sat in silence, drinking bad coffee, while around them the plant slowly returned to life. Workers completed inspection, systems came back online, normalcy reasserted itself after brushing catastrophe. Dawn was breaking when Garrett finally compiled his comprehensive report. Every stress point documented, every repair requirement detailed, every timeline estimate provided. Morrison Manufacturing could resume operations after specific maintenance, 3 days of work, maybe 4. He was signing off on the final page when the main entrance opened and expensive sedans began arriving. Corporate response delayed by overnight hours, but inevitable. Men and women in suits that cost more than monthly mortgage payments emerged, flanked by lawyers carrying briefcases that probably contained enough legal firepower to destroy careers. The lead figure was older gentleman, 60-something, carrying himself with authority that needed no announcement. His eyes found Sophia immediately, expression mixing disappointment and concern. Sophia's whisper barely reached Garrett. Wallace Hartwell, board member, my father's best friend, essentially my uncle. Wallace crossed the facility floor with purposeful stride, ignoring Richard Morrison's attempts at greeting. He stopped in front of Sophia, studied her disheveled appearance, and pulled her into brief hug. His words carried across the sudden silence. Sophia, thank God you're safe. Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. She buried her face in Wallace's shoulder body, shaking with sobs she'd been suppressing for hours. Wallace held her, then gently extracted himself to face the assembled workers and management. Someone explain what happened here. Keith Sullivan stepped forward, providing concise technical summary. The pressure buildup, the software conflict, the evacuation, Garrett's intervention. He spoke clearly without embellishment, letting facts tell the story. Wallace listened without interruption. When Keith finished, Wallace's attention shifted to Garrett. "You're Hayes, the mechanic who prevented this disaster?" Garrett stood uncomfortable with scrutiny. "Yes, sir." Wallace approached, extending hand. Garrett shook it, noting the firm grip that suggested Wallace's authority came from competence rather than inheritance. Wallace's next words carried weight that silenced the room. "Walk me through your role. Everything." Garrett complied, explaining his morning warning, Sophia's dismissal, his termination, the emergency call, the manual override. He kept it factual, avoiding editorializing about Sophia's decisions or his own feelings. When he finished, Wallace turned to Sophia. "You fired him for raising safety concerns." Sophia's voice came hoarse. "Yes, he was right about everything. I was wrong about everything. The software update I pushed was untested. I prioritized efficiency over safety. I dismissed expertise I didn't understand. Everything that happened tonight is my fault." Richard Morrison attempted to interject. "Ms. Winters was following my recommendations regarding Hayes's pattern of—" Wallace's look could have stripped paint. "Mr. Morrison, you'll have your turn. Right now, I'm interested in facts, not excuses." He turned to his entourage. "I want complete investigation. System logs, email records, decision timelines. Everything. Legal team prepare for OSHA inquiry. This situation could have killed people. I need to understand exactly how we got here." The next hour dissolved into corporate efficiency. Investigators interviewed workers, examined documentation, collected evidence. Richard Morrison's confident facade crumbled under questioning that revealed his consistent pattern of dismissing safety concerns in favor of production metrics. Wallace eventually called Garrett aside, away from the chaos. "Mr. Hayes, I need your honest assessment. Can this facility be made safe?" Garrett considered carefully before answering. "With proper investment, yes. The core infrastructure is sound, but it needs comprehensive maintenance that's been deferred for years. Equipment upgrades, updated safety protocols, and most importantly, culture change that values worker expertise." Wallace nodded slowly. "What would you need to implement those changes?" The question caught Garrett off guard. "Sir," Wallace's smile held no humor, "I'm offering you a job, Mr. Hayes. Chief Safety Officer for this facility, full authority over all safety protocols and maintenance schedules, direct reporting to corporate, bypassing local management, substantial salary increase, comprehensive benefits." "What do you say?" Garrett's mind reeled. Chief Safety Officer. The kind of position that could provide real stability for Bryn, eliminate financial stress, give him platform to prevent future disasters. But it also meant working for the company that fired him, working in the facility where Sophia had humiliated him, potentially working with Sophia herself. He looked across the room to where Sophia stood with investigators' posture defeated, facing consequences of her choices. She caught his gaze and something passed between them. Not quite forgiveness, but mutual recognition of shared humanity. They'd both made mistakes. Both faced choices about who they'd be moving forward. Garrett's response came careful. "I appreciate the offer, sir. Can I have time to consider?" Wallace clapped him on the shoulder. "Take 24 hours. But Mr. Hayes, I hope you accept. People like you with expertise and integrity and courage are rare. This facility needs you. Hell, this entire company needs you." Richard Morrison's termination came swift and public. Wallace delivered it personally with entire workforce as audience. The charges were detailed: systematic safety violations, intimidation of workers who raised concerns, falsification of maintenance records. Security escorted Richard from the premises within the hour, career destroyed, reputation in ruins. Sophia's fate proved more complicated. Wallace pulled her aside out of general earshot, but not quite private. Garrett was close enough to hear. Wallace's voice carried disappointment that cut deeper than anger. Sophia, you've been like a daughter to me since your father passed, which makes this harder. You nearly killed people tonight through arrogance and poor judgment. You fired the one person who could have prevented this disaster. Corporate wants your head. Sophia's response came hollow. I understand. I'll resign immediately. Wallace held up one hand. I'm not finished. They want your head. I convinced them that destruction serves no purpose. You made catastrophic mistakes, but you also owned them when it mattered. You called Hayes instead of covering up. You admitted fault instead of deflecting blame. That counts for something. Sophia looked up, hope flickering. What are you saying? Wallace's expression remained stern. You're demoted. Operations director position is gone. You'll work as safety compliance coordinator, reporting directly to whoever accepts the chief safety officer role. Substantial pay cut. No executive authority. You'll earn back trust through demonstrated competence, not corporate politics. And Sophia, if you make another mistake like this, I won't be able to protect you. Understood. Sophia's voice came thick with emotion. Understood. Thank you, Wallace. I won't let you down. Wallace's expression softened fractionally. See that you don't. Now go home. Get some sleep. You look like hell. Garrett drove home as December dawn painted Pennsylvania sky in shades of pink and gold. The familiar route felt different, somehow transformed by exhaustion and adrenaline crash and profound relief at being alive to see another morning. Bryn met him at the door, having apparently stationed herself there for hours despite Eleanor's attempts to get her back to bed. She launched herself at him with 7-year-old abandoned arms wrapping around his waist with desperate strength. Her voice came muffled against his jacket. You came back! Garrett lifted her, ignoring protesting muscles. Always, princess, always. Eleanor gathered her things, refusing Garrett's attempts to pay her for overnight babysitting. You take care of that girl and yourself. Get some rest. Garrett carried Bryn to the couch, both of them collapsing into cushions that felt like clouds after concrete floors and industrial metal. Bryn curled against his side, small body still trembling slightly. Her question came quiet. Did you save people, Daddy? Garrett kissed the top of her head. Yeah, baby, I did. Bryn's next words nearly destroyed him. Mommy would be proud. Garrett's arms tightened around his daughter, tears he'd been suppressing finally breaking through. I hope so, princess, I really hope so. They fell asleep, their father and daughter, on second-hand couch in rental house, safe and together and alive. Outside, the world continued turning. Inside, nothing else mattered. 3 months elapsed in blur of activity. Garrett accepted the chief safety officer position after negotiating one critical condition. Full authority meant exactly that, with no management override capabilities. Wallace Hartwell agreed immediately, putting the terms in writing with legal language that ensured compliance. The transformation of Morrison Manufacturing's safety culture became Garrett's consuming focus. He implemented anonymous reporting systems so workers could flag concerns without fear of retaliation. Mandatory safety drills taught emergency protocols. Equipment maintenance moved from deferred expense to essential investment. Most importantly, expertise got valued over hierarchy. A mechanic's warning carried equal weight to executive opinion. Production actually improved. Fewer accidents meant less downtime. Properly maintained equipment operated more efficiently. Workers who felt heard and valued engaged more fully with their responsibilities. Sophia fulfilled her demotion with unexpected grace. She arrived early, stayed late, and approached every task with meticulous attention that suggested genuine commitment to redemption. The designer suits disappeared, replaced by practical work clothes suitable for facility inspections. The imperious attitude vanished, replaced by humility that came from confronting her own catastrophic fallibility. She took online courses in industrial safety, earning certifications that weren't required but demonstrated serious intent. She studied pressure systems, mechanical engineering, all the technical knowledge her MBA had skipped. And she listened to Garrett, to Travis, to every mechanic and technician who'd spent years building practical expertise. Garrett watched her transformation with complex feelings. Part of him remained angry about that termination, the humiliation, the dismissal of his expertise. But larger part recognized genuine change. Sophia wasn't performing rehabilitation for corporate benefit. She was fundamentally reworking her understanding of value, competence, and what mattered. They worked together frequently, professional relationship that gradually became something resembling friendship. Garrett explained system operations. Sophia absorbed information like desperate student. When she made mistakes, and she made plenty, she admitted them immediately, asking how to improve rather than defending ego. Late one December evening, 3 months almost to the day after the crisis, Garrett sat in his office reviewing safety audits. The office itself remained modest. He'd refused corporate's offer of executive suite, preferring workspace adjacent to the factory floor where he could hear operations and respond immediately to concerns. Knock on the door interrupted his concentration. Sophia stood in the doorway holding comprehensive safety audit she'd completed independently. Her voice carried nervous uncertainty. "Do you have a minute? I wanted you to review this before I submit it to Wallace." Garrett gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sophia sat, handing him the tablet with her report. He read carefully, noting the thoroughness, the attention to detail, the thoughtful recommendations. The work was genuinely excellent, not just adequate, but showing real understanding of safety principles. He looked up. "This is really good, Sophia." Relief flooded her features. "Really, you're not just being nice." Garrett's smile came genuine. "I'm not known for being nice. This is solid work. You've learned a lot." Sophia's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing professional mask. "I had a good teacher." The moment stretched, weighted with things unsaid. 3 months of working together, of rebuilding trust, of recognizing shared humanity beneath professional roles. Something had shifted between them gradually and almost imperceptibly, until suddenly it felt significant. Sophia broke the silence first. "Garrett, can I ask you something personal?" He set down the tablet. "Go ahead." She took a breath, gathering courage. "Would you... I mean, this is probably inappropriate given our working relationship, but would you have dinner with me? Not work dinner, just dinner." The question hung between them. Garrett's first instinct was to list all the complications. Workplace dynamics, their history, the disaster that had defined their relationship, the fundamental differences in their backgrounds and circumstances. But then he thought about Sarah, about her death, about 3 years of putting his own life on hold while raising Bryn alone. About how Sophia had genuinely changed, had done the hard work of becoming a better person. About how life was short and second chances were rare and happiness mattered. His response came slower than intended. "I'd like that, but I have one condition." Sophia straightened, bracing for rejection. "What's that?" Garrett's smile widened. "Bryn comes too, at least the first time. If you're going to be part of my life, you need to understand what that means. I'm a package deal." Sophia's face transformed, anxiety melting into genuine joy. "I'd love to meet Bryn properly, as myself, not as the woman who fired her father." They arranged dinner for Saturday evening. Garrett spent the next 2 days alternating between anticipation and anxiety. He told Bryn, carefully framing it as friendly dinner, nothing more. But Bryn's knowing smile suggested she understood exactly what this meant. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Garrett helped Bryn pick out her favorite dress, purple with silver stars saved for special occasions. She was vibrating with excitement, asking questions faster than he could answer. The doorbell rang at 6 p.m. precisely. Garrett opened it to find Sophia transformed from corporate executive into something softer, more accessible. Casual dress instead of designer suit. Minimal makeup, hair down instead of severely pulled back. She held flowers, simple daisies, not expensive roses, and looked genuinely nervous. Bryn appeared at Garrett's elbow, studying Sophia with 7-year-old directness. "You're prettier than on TV." Sophia laughed, tension breaking. "Thank you. You must be Bryn. Your dad talks about you constantly." Bryn's response came with surprising gravity. "He talks about you too. Says you're working really hard to be better." Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the child's perception. "I am, very hard." Bryn nodded, apparently satisfied. "Okay, you can come in." The dinner went better than Garrett dared hope. They chose family Italian restaurant. Bryn loved nothing fancy but warm and welcoming. Sophia engaged with Bryn naturally, asking about school and friends and favorite books, listening to answers with genuine interest instead of adult condescension. Garrett watched them interact, something warm settling in his chest. This could work. This could actually work. Walking back to the truck afterward, Bryn skipped ahead, full of energy despite the late hour. Sophia walked beside Garrett, comfortable silence between them. She broke it first, voice soft. "Thank you for tonight, for giving me a chance after everything." Garrett's response came equally quiet. "Everyone deserves a second chance when they earn it. You've earned yours." Sophia stopped walking, turning to face him. "Have I really?" Garrett met her eyes, seeing vulnerability and hope and fear of rejection all mixed together. "Yeah, you have. These past 3 months, the work you've done, the person you've become. That matters more than one terrible day." Something shifted in Sophia's expression. She stepped closer, hand reaching up tentatively toward his face. "Garrett, I need you to know something. This isn't gratitude. It's not guilt or obligation. You're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met, and I'd like to see where this goes, if you want that too." Garrett's heart hammered. He thought about all the reasons this was complicated, all the ways it could go wrong. Then he thought about Sarah's final words, about him being good man, about showing Bryn courage, about not letting fear prevent living. His hand covered Sophia's where it rested against his cheek. "I want that too," Bryn's voice carried from ahead. "Dad, are you guys kissing? Because that's gross." They both laughed, moment broken, but something important established. Sophia's hand slipped into Garrett's fingers, intertwining naturally. They walked back to the truck together, Bryn chattering about dessert, Sophia and Garrett stealing glances that spoke volumes. At the truck, Sophia kissed Garrett's cheek gently before heading to her own car. Her parting words carried warmth. "Good night, Garrett. Thank you for tonight, for everything." Garrett watched her drive away, feeling lighter than he had in years. Bryn climbed into the truck, grinning with 7-year-old satisfaction. Her observation came smug. "You like her?" Garrett couldn't deny it. "Yeah, kiddo. I think I do." Bryn's approval was immediate. "Good, she's nice now, and she makes you smile the way Mommy did in pictures." Back home, after Bryn was asleep, Garrett stood in the living room looking at photos of Sarah. Guilt tried to surface, feeling something for another woman after years of grief, but it couldn't quite take hold. His voice came whisper quiet. "I hope you'd understand, Addie. I hope you'd approve. Bryn needs to see me happy, needs to know life continues, and Sophia. She's good, really good, not perfect, but trying so hard to be better. That counts for something, right?" Sarah's photo offered no answer, but Garrett felt peace regardless. He was moving forward without forgetting, honoring the past while embracing the future, showing Bryn that love didn't have expiration date, that second chances existed, that courage meant risking heartbreak for possibility of joy. His phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. "Thank you for tonight. I haven't felt this hopeful in years. Sleep well. Garrett typed back. Me neither. Good night, Sophia. He set the phone down, turned off the lights, and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments to build on tonight's foundation. Morrison Manufacturing would need continued vigilance. Bryn would need guidance as she grew. Sophia would need patience as they navigated complicated history toward uncertain future. But tonight, Garrett Hayes felt something he'd thought lost forever after Sarah's death. He felt possibility. He felt hope. He felt like maybe, just maybe, the universe had second acts after all. And sometimes when you did the right thing, even when it cost everything, the universe found ways of paying you back. Not always immediately, not always obviously, but eventually if you kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept choosing courage over comfort, eventually good things found their way home.